Hi, Elizabeth. This is Ira. I am recording here my audio feedback on your statement of belief, which I hope will be helpful as you move from this into the next major assignment for the course, defining good argument in digital contexts. So I'm just going to start right off. I think it's nice, it's helpful that you offer a general definition of argument right off the bat. Argument is defined as, and then acknowledge that people argue in a lot of different ways, and indeed that there are no clear set rules for how to argue. It's interesting, though, you say there are some guidelines, and it'd be interesting to know how you see your definition or your way of thinking about good argument, how it matches up with what you take to be general guidelines. In other words, do you see your definition as quote unquote normal or like in line with broad guidelines, or do you see it as more idiosyncratic or unusual, and why? Um, so here you really come to your actual definition. So good argument consists of understanding, respect, and substantial facts. And so that you essentially tell us that there are going to be three basic features of good argument in your view. And one of the things that I would be helped by right off the bat is a fuller understanding of what actually arguments for. So here you give us a sense right off the bat. It's about persuading others to share one's view. Cool. Well, what's the relationship between that and these three elements of good argument that you articulate here? And what makes some efforts to persuade others to share one's view good and others not as good? And I think like we start to get into that right away, immediately, when you talk about understanding someone's argument. So if understanding consists of fully comprehending your topic and both sides of the argument. And by the way, I want to be a little careful here. We often say both sides, but of course, most arguments have lots and lots of sides. And so what that means is we rarely fully understand the impact of all the relevant ways of approaching an argument. Although certainly some arguments are face-to-face between two people, and there are indeed basically two sides. Lots of arguments are multilateral. There's many people arguing. Or they're mass mediated. They're being made by some entity, some person or organization, and they're being transmitted to a wide range of other people, wide range of different kinds of audience members. And so in both of those latter kinds of cases, an argument doesn't just have two sides. There's not just both sides. There are many, many possible sides. And I think that really pushes you here to think more, well, if there are many possible sides, so for all of these instances that it's not just two people arguing back and forth, for all the rest of these moments, what does it mean to fully understand the impact of the multiple sides? We can't, but what is full enough, and how do you decide how much you need to understand before it's legitimate or appropriate to argue? So you note here that it's necessary to understand the different emotions and kinds of people. So in other words, the different multiple stances on argument, because that allows you to make your argument effective. And so what I would want to know here, so are you saying that any argument that's effective is good, or are only some kinds of effective argument good? If the former, if all effective argument is good, why and how would you respond to people who say, well, but surely some effective argument is bad? And if the latter, if only some kinds of effective argument are good, how does that relate to understanding different emotions, different kinds of people? How does it relate to having refuting facts for your own argument? In other words, how does it relate to understanding the possibility that your argument may not be correct or may not be as strong or good as you would wish it to be? And I know, so here you move from understanding to respect, and these things seem clearly connected in some way. And I'd like to hear you articulate more fully, what is the connection between understanding and respect in good argument as you understand it? And I think it's interesting you talk about having respect for yourself as part of good argument. So it's not just about respecting others, but also respecting yourself as an arguer. So I'd be interested here to know a little bit more. What does that mean to you? What do you take self-respect in argument to look like? Why is it important? Is it just because of, it helps you seem more confident and assertive, or indeed be more confident and assertive? In other words, is it just about effects, or is there an ethical component here? Often when we talk about respect, we mean something ethical. You certainly don't have to, but I'd be interested to know more about how you see the two fitting together or not, and why. And then you follow up then by talking about knowing one's facts. And my question here is really, what are facts? What is a fact? How do we count some things as facts and not other things? Why? What makes some kinds of assertions true facts or proper facts, real facts, and others not? Others lies or misunderstandings or non-facts of one or another sort. And how do you, in good argument, how do you go forward when the different parties don't agree on the rules for counting some things as facts? In other words, when you don't have a shared process that tells you what to count as a fact, how can argument proceed? Can it proceed? Is good argument possible under those kinds of circumstances? Why not, etc. And you describe then, and I think it's helpful that you look here then not just at what you think the components of good argument are, but also what you take to be a typifying or characteristic feature of bad argument, which is aggression and disrespect. And then right away, though, you kind of walk that back a little bit by suggesting that there's a good middle ground or middle road with aggression, which I think is interesting, and I'd love to hear more about as you move forward with this piece into the next, more fully theoretical, more systematic piece. What it means to have a middle ground of aggression. And then this piece about not respecting the other person's ideas, then they will not care what you have to say, and there will not even be an argument. So I think that's, that's probably often true, but also there are moments where that's not true, right? I mean, in many cases of abuse, the abuser is not respecting the arguments of the person that the abuser is abusing, of the person being abused. And yet, abusers are often very effective through abuse in persuading their victims of many things. So here's where we run into really a difficult limit, right, for how much we can count on merely the effective. Which is not to say you can't be focused on the effective. Of course you can. But I want you to think through that limit. What do we do for those cases where effective argument is possible with and through disrespect? Are those moments of good argument? If so, why? And if not, how does that force you to integrate this moment in your essay a little bit differently than you might otherwise. So I think it's interesting that your essay as a whole is about effectivity, but then you're in other words, all of the rationale behind all of these different features of good argument, as you outline them, is about being effective. But your focus is not on effects, but rather on method. In other words, you count an argument good if it has been respectful, understanding, and if the arguer has known their facts. And so there's a sense in which you offer a criteria, a set of criteria for defining good argument that are not about the effects or consequences. And so I just thought that was sort of interesting, and I'd love to see you flesh out a little bit more fully the tension between defining good argument in a way that's about process and method versus defining good argument in a way that's about effects or consequences. And then this final idea really, in some ways, I think I'd love to see you do more with that sense. And by the way, this is not a critique of what you've done here. You did a good job on this. This is about what kinds of things you might think about moving forward. I'd love to see you do more with the question of what do we do? Like, how do we decide what to count as good argument? Precisely because there are so many different people with different ideas. How do we judge argument when we know that others won't agree with us? When we don't have the same procedural rules for what to count as a fact. When we don't even agree necessarily about whether somebody's being respectful. Under these conditions of uncertainty and difficulty of finding agreement, even on very basic things, and I don't just mean, by the way, the U.S. politically right now or whatever, I mean these conditions that are ongoing. We've had these conditions for thousands of years in one way or another. But when those are our conditions, how do we, again, sort of work through that relationship between effectivity and whatever we're going to count as ethicality, or the relationship between process and product in defining and determining goodness in argument? So anyways, those are a few of the thoughts that your statement of belief raises for me that I'd love to see you address in systematic fashion in the next essay, the Defining Good Arguments in Digital Contexts essay, which of course also talks about digital contexts in particular. So it's really focused on our world in the concrete digital realm. So I hope these thoughts will be useful in that stage of things, and I also hope you won't hesitate to come see me in office hours and make an appointment to talk through your writing going forward. I look forward to reading you and to talking more soon. Thanks.